Okay, all right. Number one, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this invitation to talk to you about maritime industry in the 21st century and indeed maritime dynamics. Taking on board what Dr. Datta said, I shall try to keep within the 12 minutes allocated to me. So it will be a bit of a gallop through the whole thing. But what I want to cover is, let me see if I can get this on to doing it this way. Right, okay. Introduction to commercial shipping as it stands today, decision-making in the industry, how the oceans are becoming busier places, evolution of navies, and are they still guardians of the world's oceans, and changing face of maritime security. This is what the maritime world looked like yesterday afternoon, my time. I'm speaking to you from Melbourne, Australia. I'm in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. This gives you an idea. The green arrows or arrowheads are cargo ships, so that could be container ships or general cargo ships. The red arrowheads are tankers, whether that be crude oil or product tankers. The orange ships or boats are fishing vessels, and the blue ones, the bright blue ones, are cruise liners. But you can see here the pattern of ships, and just have a quick look at the significant volume of particularly cargo ships going from the Malacca Straits near Malaya down to South Africa, around South Africa, rather than going their normal route, which would be through the Suez Canal up in the middle of the picture. I think the other thing I'd like to point out here, which hasn't been so evident in the past, is the number of ships that are going on the Northeast Passage between the along the north coast of Russia, making their way from the Pacific Ocean into the Atlantic Ocean, which is increasing. So the global commercial fleet at the moment stands at around about 109 vessels. It's 9,000 vessels, which is probably closer now to about 110, 111. And in 2023, they carried 12.3 billion tons of cargo, which is 80% of global trade by volume. So that's enormous. And thereby, these vessels are absolutely critical to global trade. But the maritime industry also has to have ports, and there are over 2,900 ports around the globe, and this is what they look like. They are everywhere. Ships visiting and leaving. And those ports range from some of the very biggest ones in China, Singapore, in the Middle East, and a few in Europe, to very small ones around the coast of Africa particularly. But international shipping is an international organization, and so therefore different countries play different parts. So the biggest shipbuilding countries at the moment, China is the largest, followed by the Republic of Korea and Japan, with a number of other countries just coming in with a small amount of shipping, but not very much. You will notice that none of the European countries, or indeed the United States, figure on this list. Ownership, Greece is still the largest ship-owning country in the world, followed by China and Japan. China has recently taken over second place from Japan, but other countries coming in as well, including India and the Republic of Korea. Registration, which is important because the three largest Ship registries are Liberia, Panama, and the Marshall Islands. Number one, these are all three of them are commercial entities, and I'll talk about this slightly more in a minute. But number two, none of them have navies. They are purely commercial entities. The recycling or scrapping of ships is conducted predominantly in Bangladesh, secondly in India and in Pakistan, with a few ships being recycled in China. And the majority of seafarers come from the Philippines, Russia, and Indonesia, along with India and some Chinese. So it's a very international scene, and ship owners come from all over the world. And in 2023, a total of 64.7 million gross tons of shipping was built of all types, whether it be the top left-hand corner, which is a bulk carrier carrying dry cargo like coal, iron ore, grain, tankers, that's a crude oil carrier, a very large crude oil carrier in the top right-hand corner, a container ship or a gas carrier in the bottom right-hand corner. And here we can see the countries, as I've said, who are building ships at the moment. According to this statistic from the United Nations Convention of Trade and Development, in their review of maritime transport 2024, they noted that 51% of all the new ships built were built in China. Secondly, in Korea at 28%, and thirdly, in Japan, with a smattering across the other countries. Europe, you'll note, did make 2.5%, but if you look, most of the ships that they built were ferries and passenger ships. Whereas you will see that certainly China builds most of the bulk carriers and most of the container ships. Republic of Korea builds most of the oil tankers and many of the container ships. So that gives you an idea. And again, please note that whilst Europe is building some passenger ships and ferries, the United States is not listed here at all. They are in with the rest of the world. However, we're going to look at the United States. That figure of the number of ships or the tonnage of ships is the equivalent to 549 US aircraft carriers. 549. And just remember that China would have built half of those. At the moment, it takes the United States 10 years to build one aircraft carrier. China could do 270 in a year. But there are lots of other kinds of vessels at sea. Artisanal fishermen, loads of those, most of them not registered. Small fishing vessels, which we will see around the coasts of many of our countries. This is a small British Cornish fishing vessel. Slightly larger fishing vessels, but the vessels that are coming into dominance at the moment are the big factory ships that are processing thousands and thousands of tons of fish every day. The distribution of ships is mostly in Asia, some in Africa, the Americas a bit, Europe, and not very much down in my corner of the world. There are 20 million plus pleasure vessels that have access to the ocean. From a maritime security perspective, who has access to the ocean is extremely important. You can travel, on that boat there, you could smuggle, traffic, you could even lay mines. As you could from this small vessel, and you could certainly move things very quickly in that kind of a vessel. And they come from marinas, not particularly secure locations, many of them, scattered, particularly in the Western world around our coastlines. And as I've mentioned once before, the cruise industry, a very fast growing industry that can take over 1.5 million passengers at any one time. Represents 1% of the maritime industry. But what are the commercial shipping drivers? Well, I've talked about the 109,000 shipping companies. Each shipping company owns approximately 5 vessels, according to Martin Stopford, which means that there are over 200,000 ship owning companies around the world. Many people will just own the ship, but won't actually manage it. So they have ship managers and charterers, who are the people that put the cargo onto the ships. Then you've got flag states, as I've said, most of these. Let's have a look. So, as I've said, almost 22,000 shipping companies globally. Open registries, these are all commercial entities. And this again is from United Nations Convention of Trade and Development for their review of maritime transport. And you can see that it is the open registries, which are commercial entities and not nations. The reason being that the flag has been, as it were, franchised out to these companies to run the registries. And the registry's job is purely focused on providing the best level of service to the shipping industry. The top 3 flags there, Liberia, Panama, Marshall Islands, hold almost 50% of the world's tonnage on their books. And this is very important because if, for instance, you looked at the 2 marked figures down below, United States, you would think, well, the United States has got 3,000 vessels, and the largest registry, Liberia, only has 5,000 vessels, so they're not that far short. But then look at the size of the vessel, the average size of the vessel, which is only 3,775 gross tons, deadweight tons, which makes it quite a small vessel. Therefore, most of the vessels that they have listed are fishing vessels. And the United States of America has the largest internal waterways system. And so that's what most of their ships are doing. So therefore, again, this is commercial entities. The other element is marine insurance. Now, this is one of the 2 ships that was sunk a few days ago. It's the Eternity Sea in the Red Sea. And of course, what that does, it increases insurance around the world. Lloyd's is still the largest marine insurance market in the world. And they put an additional war risk premium on areas that they regard as dangerous. And you will see on the slide there, the area along the east coast of Somalia and up into the bottom third of the Red Sea is called an additional war risk premium area. And what that means is that each time a ship transits that, they have to pay an additional war risk premium, which is 1% of the value of the ship. So that makes it extremely expensive. And with the price of oil at the moment, which isn't too bad, driving all the way around Africa, which is an additional 16,000 miles. It takes an additional 16 days. But it means that they can increase the cost of the cargo they're carrying. And also an additional 16 days means that they spend less time idle and more time with cargo. So actually, it's quite beneficial for them in a number of ways. So those are three of the factors, and therefore, what's one of the main things that you see missing from this triangle here? Well, it's governments. So therefore, the lead economist, a guy called Martin Stopford, Dr. Martin Stopford, looks at the maritime industry and refers to it as a perfect market. What else is at sea? Well, 98% of all intercontinental digital traffic, and I am talking to you via one of these undersea cables right now. 98% of all intercontinental activity goes through undersea cables. Around 30% of all our oil and gas is extracted offshore. And indeed, as you will see from the slide there, that is increasing significantly. The reason being that whilst it takes longer to actually establish an offshore platform, once you've got it, it will keep producing oil or gas for much longer than an onshore platform. And therefore the returns are much greater. The capital investment has to be much higher, but the returns are much greater. And also in an environmentally sensitive world, out of sight, out of mind. Undersea mining. This is going to be a big thing, especially as competition for various minerals and precious or unusual metals comes to the fore. And you will note that many of the mining areas that are identified here are in the middle of the ocean. Therefore, they are not within anybody's boundaries, which is going to make them particularly difficult to police and is going to potentially cause quite a few problems. It is interesting that in 1982, one of the reasons why the United States did not sign up to the United Nations Convention for the Law of the Sea was that in the fourth paragraph down, they conducted a review of UNCLOS, as it's called, and they recognized that deep seabed mining, part of the convention, does not meet the United States objectives. So they did not and have not joined the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. So it was not a Trump-led idea. That was back from another Republican, but some years ago, over 40 years ago. Maritime resources management, illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. Fishing has become industrialized. I talked about the artisanal fishermen. Well, there are lots of other people that are doing it as well, and some of them, the ships are enormous. 40% of the world's population, developing nations, rely upon fish, their main source of protein. And there are more than 4 million commercial fishing vessels at sea. Importantly, fishing vessels are not within the remit of the IMO and are within the remit of the nations from which they come. So now let's look very quickly at the evolution of formal navies. Effectively, they were all about looking after trade. And indeed, the Royal Navy that was set up in the 1660s or 1546, it served the City of London, not the Crown. And that was very much the purpose of the navies. However, things have been changing. On the left-hand side, you'll see a graph that shows how quickly the commercial shipping industry has grown in order to be able to feed the demand of people. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the way that the Royal Navy has shrunk. But this is typical of all of the Western navies. And the decline of the US Navy was much sharper than that. And modern naval warfare has changed. As my colleague, Professor Chris Bellamy, said in one of his articles in our journal, the International Journal of Maritime Crime and Security, the Ukrainians were able to destroy the Russian Black Sea fleet without having a navy, and were able to achieve that by using drones. And the Houthis have been able to have, and as I've shown you already with the sinking of the ship, have had a significant impact on merchant ships going through the Bab el-Mandeb, which is the bottom end of the Red Sea. So much so that the German Navy are not deploying to the Red Sea because of their fear of being hit by the Houthis. And the American admiral, the US Navy admiral, said that he thinks you'd have to go back to World War II to see the intensity of combat that the US Navy is going through at the moment. But the fact is that all of the Western navies are reducing in size due to cost. One of the things that I talked about in an article that I wrote in the International Journal of Maritime Crime and Security was the spectrum of maritime security, because it covers a number of areas. As you can see here, state on state, which would be what's happening around the South China Sea and the Black Sea, protection of trade, which I've talked about, management of ocean resources, smuggling, trafficking, mass maritime migration by sea and stowaways, terrorism, which I haven't touched on, but is still very relevant, disasters, both man-made and natural, and oceanography. And apart from that, if you imagine the spectrum as we see it certainly in diagrams, there are areas that are out of sight, and that would include cybersecurity, both operational technology and information technology, transnational organized crime, corruption, fraud, extortion, altering global political balance, and the big one, climate change. But the other thing that is important to understand here, what is the difference between these two rainbows? Well, the first one, the secondary outer rainbow, the colors of the spectrum are in reverse order, which just emphasizes the fact that it is dynamic. So we're in a maritime century. The oceans of the world become progressively more crowded with cargo vessels, exploration ships, fishing boats, and pleasure craft. With over 400 unresolved maritime territorial disputes globally, we are moving from looking at landscapes to seascapes as the abundant new resource. And despite an endemic affliction of sea blindness, i.e., people don't really understand what the sea is doing, the largely unexplored abyss, if we manage effectively, could be the solution to many of our problems or could seal our doom. Thank you very much. And just a quick plug here for the International Journal of Maritime Crime and Security, which covers many of the things that I have spoken about and a whole lot more. So have a look at the journal, and hopefully you will find it interesting. And if you want to send us an article, we will be delighted to have a look at it. Thank you.